Welcome to the second video, and here we're going to talk about rhythm. And what we mean by rhythm is, where does the conduction start? What is generating the rhythm here? And so you'll remember, you were taught this conduction fiber system. And the conduction fibers, I like to think of them as the superhighways, the superconducting fibers of the heart, and it is through here that the electrical impulse moves very quickly. And that's really important because you need the heart to all contract together. If you have to wait for conduction to slowly meander through the heart, it's going to be a very disorganized conduction, because then first the top will conduct, then the middle, then the bottom, and that's not going to be very coordinated. You want it all to conduct at one time. So I redrew that same picture over here so that I could kind of demonstrate. So this reddish stuff represents the heart muscle, and you can see that it starts here in the SA node, the sinus node, the sinoatrial node, and it quickly moves down these fibers, like this Bachmann bundle here, to get down to the AV node. And as it does this, it goes through the atrium really quickly, allowing the entire atria to contract at once. And then it hits the AV node, and we know that it pauses there for a second. And it pauses there because, the blood's got to get some time to move in here. Fluid moves more slowly than electricity does, so you got a bit of a pause there. And then it goes through these ventricular superhighways. And so this is the bundle of His here, and then these the bundle branches, and then you got these Purkinje fibers that allow the conduction to go really quickly through the heart, and then these ones penetrate deep into the muscle to allow it to get into the muscle fast. Okay, so that's how it will go normally, starting in the SA node, coming down here, and then coming down through the rest of the ventricles. And this is what generates the waveforms that we see. So the first thing that you're going to see is a P waveform. And the P, what it represents is the depolarization of the atria, right? And then we know that it gets to the AV node and it pauses. So we get this little pause over here. And then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to see is that the conduction is going to go through the ventricles, and it's going to depolarize the ventricles very quickly. And when it does that, you get something that we call the QRS. All right, and so that's the fast QRS. And then as the ventricles repolarize, you're going to get what we call the T wave over here. And that's the T wave. And so that's what it will typically look like. And so atria depolarize, the AV nodal pause, the ventricles depolarize, then the ventricles repolarize as the T. And you might ask, where do the atrias repolarize? Well, they do it. It happens at this QRS time, but it all gets lost in this QRS because the ventricles are so much bigger that waveform basically overwhelms the atria repolarization waveform, so you don't really see it. So if you have this sort of depolarization happening, this sort of rhythm that starts here in the SA node, that's going to be what we call normal sinus rhythm, because it's starting from the sinus node. Where else can you get rhythms starting? Well, rhythms can start in the atria, and they can start in the ventricles. And there are a lot of different ways that this can happen. We're only going to look at a few just to get our feet wet. All right? And so the first one that we're going to look at is one that starts in the atrium. So instead of starting at the SA node, what if it started somewhere else? Like, what if it started here and here and here and multiple different places? What's going to happen? Well, one thing that you're going to lose is the waveform that corresponds to the travel down these bundles here, because this one is a short trip, this one's a little bit longer, this one's a little bit longer, but you could see that it's not going to have that nice P wave that we had before. So we're going to lose that. Once you get over here, however, you're going to pause, right? And then you're going to go down here and you're going to have your normal conduction through the ventricle. So let's think about how that may look. And so the way that would look is, instead of P waves, what you'll have is maybe just kind of a wavy line, and then you're going to have your QRS and your T, and then the next one that hits and a QRS and a T, and then the next one that hits a QRS and a T, and maybe the next one's a little bit further away, like that one that's way up there, and then the QRS, then the T. So what are we seeing here? It's a couple of things. Number one, there are no P waves, right? Because we knew that it wasn't following this standard conduction through the SA node and through these pathways, we're also seeing that these are kind of not happening at regular intervals, right? Some are further apart and some of them are closer. And we knew that was going to happen too, right? Because some of these were further apart. This is going to take longer to go to reach there because we know that it's not taking the superconducting highways. It's meandering slowly through the rest of the heart. And some of them are really close, like this one. And so we have this irregular beat here. I'll write it up here, actually. It's irregular. So no P waves, and it's irregular. But then we notice that the QRS, that looks the same, right? And then the T waves, that also looked the same here, as we had seen with normal sinus rhythm. So this is something that we call atrial fibrillation. Fibrillation is like this kind of wavy, shaky, tremulous waveform that we see here, and atrial because it starts in the atrium. And so the characteristics that we see is that it's irregular. We see no P waves. And so this is one of the atrial rhythms that we could see. Now let's look at another rhythm that starts above the ventricles. So we're going to call that supraventricular. And sometimes what will happen is you can get a circuit. Okay, and so normally what happens is the electricity comes through here, it goes through the AV node, it pauses there for a bit, and then it comes down here and it fires off through the ventricles. But what if something else happens? What if it goes through the AV node and then it circles back around and then comes back again to the AV node, right? And so you got now this little circle that is going around and around and around and around, re-entering the AV node. And so we can actually, another name for this thing here is a AV nodal reentrant tachycardia. And what you're going to see again is, are we going to see P waves? Do we have depolarization of the atria like we normally do? No, we don't. So we're not going to see the normal P wave. So we're going to see no P, right? Are we going to have a normal QRS? Do we have travel through this his Purkinje system as we normally would? Yes, we do, right? Because it's eventually going to go through here. And so we will have a normal QRS there and perhaps a T. Now, what happens with these cycles is they tend to go pretty fast because you're bypassing some of that blocking. And so what happens is you get QRST, 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 QRST. Again, no P, but we do have the QRSs, and we do have the T waves. All right, and it's this one, even though I didn't really draw it that way, just because I'm not good at drawing, is these are pretty regular in the rates, let's say, okay? Even though you didn't see it this way and the way I drew it, let's say they are regular. And so this thing here we call an AV nodal reentrant tachycardia. It is a supraventricular rhythm. So that is a rhythm, right? Where does the rhythm originate? Does it originate from the SA node? No. Does it originate from the atria in here? Multiple cases like atrial fibrillation? No. It's originating from this little circuit that we have that's going here, that I drew over here. And so that is called SVT, AV nodal reentry tachycardia. Let's look at another one. Let's look at one that starts in the ventricles. So let's say it starts somewhere in there. And what are you going to notice, again, with this one? Are you going to, so we're going to let's call this one ventricular tachycardia. Is there going to be the normal P wave? No, because we're not going to be coming through the atria. We're not going to be depolarizing that. We're starting over here. There's not going to be the delay in here. We're just going to start here. Let's say this one's going fast for some reason, but is it going to be traveling through these superconducting fibers? No. And remember that time on the EKG is on this axis. So this is time, and this is voltage, right? So the bigger the waves, the more voltage, the broader the waves, the more time it takes to do it. So now we are going to look at the same thing here, and we're going to say, all right, fine. This guy here that we got starting here, it's going to meander slowly through the ventricles. And so you're going to have your QRS type thing, but it's going to be big, right? Because it's going to take a lot of time. And so this particular tachycardia tends to look something like this. And it goes, usually pretty fast. You can see how the QRS is wide here. this tends to be, it could be a stable rhythm, but it might not allow enough blood to fill into the heart, not allow enough time for that to happen, and so you don't want to stay in that rhythm if you can avoid it. And there are ways to treat that. And so this we looked at is a ventricular rhythm, and so what we see here that the main point is that the QRS was wide because we were not following these superconducting His-Purkinje fibers that allow us to get through the ventricles quickly. And so now we looked really at three rhythms here. We looked at an atrial one that started in the atrium. We looked at a supraventricular one that started here in a re-entry circuit there, and we looked at one at the AV node, and we looked at one that started in the ventricle. Now, why don't you take a look at the 3 EKGs that you have in your packet and see if you can make a couple guesses as to where you think the rhythm of those may be starting. Okay? We'll talk to you in the next video.